While the innumerable shooting societies, brass bands, music groups and brewery horses pass us by, let's take a brief look at the history of this world-famous event. How and when did the whole thing begin? On October the 12th, 1810, the Crown Prince, who would later become Ludwig I of Bavaria, got married to Princess Theresa of Saxony-Hildburghausen. The royal court felt that the common people should also be allowed to share in the happy occasion, and so, 5 days after the wedding celebrations, the National Guard organized a large public horse race as a grand finale. The race was held in a large area of open land to the west of the city of Munich. The vast crowd of onlookers was joined by the royal family. They were eager for people to regard the event as a sort of national celebration, reinforcing the traditional ties between the German regions of Bavaria, Swabia, Franconia and the Palatinate. After the first great success, the horse race and the subsequent celebrations, all those involved decided to repeat the whole thing in the same place at the same time every year. The Oktoberfest was born. In the early days, the Oktoberfest's special beer still didn't exist. It was only in 1818 that a Munich brewer received permission to serve the somewhat strong Märzen beer in his tent, together with food. A roundabout was also added, together with a swing and a clay pigeon shooting booth. Very gradually, the first booths and traders began to appear. The beer is due to be officially served in the tents in a few minutes' time. Until then, let's enjoy this colourful parade a while longer. The procession of the landlords' families, the decorated coaches, the magnificent brewery horses, the happy waitresses on their ornamental floats, and all the uniformed brass bands. Moments after the last of the horse-drawn carriages has entered the massive entrance gate, the Oktoberfest site is filled by thousands of visitors. The festival lasts 16 days, during which time it will be attended by more than 6 million guests from all over the world. When the 30-metre-high Bavaria statue was erected in 1850, the Oktoberfest received an imposing symbol that remains unsurpassed to this day. At exactly 12 noon, when the 12th rocket is fired, the mayor taps the first keg with the cry of "Ot Zapftis!" It's tapped. And Prost, the Oktoberfest is officially opened, and is definitely roast chicken. Every year, inside and outside the tents, around 500,000 roast chickens are consumed by hungry visitors. Another hit as far as food is concerned is the pork sausage. The visitors polish off around 400,000 of them at each Oktoberfest. The atmosphere gets happier and more relaxed as the beer starts to flow. People buy Oktoberfest keepsakes and souvenirs. They start getting to know each other, begin enjoying the view. And by the time evening comes, the happiness all round has rubbed off on just about everybody. Hit songs, old and new, are played at the festival, and there's always one that is so catchy that it becomes a so-called Wiesen hit and gets played in the tents for years afterwards. That applies to all the guest levels, upstairs as well as downstairs. Those who prefer things a bit quieter look for a good seat in the garland-festooned area just outside the tent. The whole world meets up here too. The Vogel-Jakob has one of the oldest stands here at the Oktoberfest. It's also one of the smallest. His famous bird imitations are as popular as ever. All kinds of Oktoberfest souvenirs, keepsakes, mascots, lucky charms and knickknacks can be found absolutely everywhere. In fact, you can probably find anything if you look long enough.
Das gibt's nicht einmal. Einmal gibt's es, aber da bin ich doch.
It's been one of the most popular presents for generations now. The special heart-shaped spicy cake known as the Lebkuchenherz, complete with message. Since the 19th century, the traditional fairground attractions here have included the chain carousel and the ship swing. The unmistakable sound of the orchestrion is also an integral part of Oktoberfest nostalgia. All over the Wiesen, the high-tech can be found alongside the traditional, just as in real life. All this wild locomotion should go straight to the good old Krinoline. No noisy loudspeakers here. Instead, there's live Umparband music for one of the oldest roundabouts at the fair. This old wooden roundabout radiates all the ease and comfort that Bavaria is famous for, a secret known to innumerable Oktoberfest visitors ever since it was built in 1909. The Krinoline will always be everyone's favourite, no matter how old they happen to be. And the same goes for the children's roundabout. Other traditional firms have survived the test of time too. Visitors to the Wurfbude repeatedly try to prove that Oktoberfest beer has no effect on their accuracy. All Oktoberfest aficionados love the sight and the sound of fairground organs, large and small. In the late afternoon, the sunshine gives the place a very special atmosphere. And here, the notorious Schichtel is completely in his element.
Jetzt geht's sogar jemand kennenlernen. Attacke! Und jetzt leid Willi was erleben. Jubel! Jubel! Auf geht's beim Schichtel!
And now it's time for the Schichtel to show us a rather special device that has made everyone's blood run cold since the year 1872.
Sie liegt wie ein Vogel. Meine Damen und Herren und liebe Kinder, ich zähle nun auf 3. Bei 3 fällt das Bein und der Kopf vom Rumpf und jetzt gibt's Obacht. Ringo! 1, 2, 3! Stopp ist der Schädel. Jeder Mensch hat Blut in sich, sogar die.
Bravo, die Portion.
Very fortunately, the execution of a living person on the guillotine has passed off safely. The convicted woman appears to have kept her head after all. There are several other scary places here. The numerous ghost trains contain all manner of monsters from fairy tales and horror. This is the oldest film footage of the Munich Oktoberfest. In 1910, the festival celebrated its 100th anniversary. The guest of honour was Luitpold the Prince Regent, who received homage from his Bavarian subjects outside the royal tent. Who would have believed back then that this celebration in honour of the royal house of Wittelsbach would soon become such a popular Republican festival? A horse race formed part of the festival from the very start, and until World War I it was a great success with the public. These days, people have forgotten the formerly popular contests such as hoop rolling, ring piercing or bicycle racing. At that time, the Prince Regent enjoyed displays of sports and gymnastics. These days, the gymnastics usually take the form of who can lift the most beer mugs. It was in 1921, after World War I, that a proper Oktoberfest was held again. People had a lot to catch up on, and there were 300,000 visitors. Today, the figure is roughly 7 million. The Wellenbahn wasn't exactly daring, but it was still the predecessor of today's bumper cars. The Oktoberfest changed its appearance incredibly quickly. Only the gentle Krinolina still survives from those days. The pleasure in those days was somewhat one-sided, as proven by the lads who had to wind the machines all the time. In the 1920s, there was also a ride on the so-called wild donkey. More peace-loving souls preferred to ride on the children's merry-go-round, which was pulled by real horses. A perennial favourite with young and old was the good old Punch and Judy show. In those days, a Mass, a litre mug of beer, cost 1 mark. But during the inflation period, a mass of beer cost 21 million marks. And a roast fish cost 48 million. A nice juicy roast chicken has always been among the top culinary specialities at the Oktoberfest. In 1881, the first ox roasting tent was opened. and around the turn of the century, the roast fish ladies provided competition for the roast chicken stalls. No Oktoberfest would be complete without swinging ships, flying swings and tobogganing. In 1921 there were just 12 of these toboggan runs. Of course, the audience really enjoyed the passengers' acrobatic antics. During the 1950s, the Devil's Wheel was a popular meeting point for the menfolk, a platform for the tough and the not quite so tough. First Oktoberfest Saturday in 1950, Thomas Wimmer, Munich's mayor at that time, tapped the first barrel of beer at exactly 12 noon. Every Munich mayor has had to tap the first barrel ever since. The accompanying phrase, Ortsaftis, or It's Tapped, has now become a part of Oktoberfest history. The Association to check on fair beer servings was formed back in 1899. Until today, it has continued to argue about exactly which level means full. Back then, just as today, everyone rocked, sang and celebrated with happy abandon. The special state of inebriation known as the Wiesenrausch is still as popular as ever too. That's when the medical helpers arrive and discreetly take the beer-sodden guests off to the sobering up tent. The big popular shows have died out too. Bedouins and Tartar tribesmen were the big sensation back then. The last vestige of this tradition was a Hawaiian village in 1959. Back then, it took just one colourful paper collar to transport the average Bavarian to the South Seas. One real highlight of the Oktoberfest that still exists today is when the Vogel-Jakob explains how he does his fascinating birdsong imitations.
Dann nimmst du einen Reisnagel oder ein Patschal Kaugummi. Liegen nur umeinander. Da drücken sie es auf. Wer eine Gaumenplatte hat, der kann auch pfeifen. Ja, der tut halt das Pfeifel an die Platte hindrücken. Nicht wie gestern einer, der hat die 10 raus Pfeifel rein und das Gebiss drauf. Und wie er Pfiffer hat, hat sie ihm 10 ausgehauen. Ne? Da hinten war eine Frau, die hat keine Ahnung gehabt. Bei einer Frau haut das Gebiss mit einer Wucht hinten ins Knack, das Gebiss knapp zu und pfeift eine Frau drum. Was meinst du, wie das Weiberl Pfiffer hat?
And after the stresses and strains of the day, there's just one time-honoured thing left to do. Sleep it off.